You're listening to Rendezvous with the Writer with Bobbi Jean and Jim Bell, only on LA Talk Radio.
Welcome to Rendezvous with the Writer, where readers and writers meet.
And
story is everything. We're your hosts tonight, Jim and Bobbi Bell. You've just been listening to Hot Texas, the Hot Texas Swing Band, and our friend Alex Dormont.
Yes, and we appreciate that they provide the music to open and close the show every week. And let's see, tonight is show number 98. So if you go to look for it on demand at any of your favorite streaming platforms, Rendezvous with a Writer, and then you're looking for episode 98. And you can follow us on Spotify and Amazon Music and LA Talk Radio and Podbean. And we're excited to welcome our guest tonight. Who's our guest?
Special guest, Katie McQuaid. Her book, Humble Yet Fierce, which is my life behind the curtain of the CIA.
And here it is. Welcome, Katie.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
We're delighted to have you. Remind us, Jim, where did we meet Katie?
Tucson.
Oh, at that
Tucson Festival of Books,
Tucson Festival.
Back in March.
That's right. I can't believe here we are in August already, Katie.
I know, it's crazy.
And where are you joining us from?
I am in Lake Frederick, Virginia tonight.
Very good. Very good. So we're East Coast to Southwest.
Southwest,
tonight. Yeah. East
That's
Coast
where we
to
are,
Southwest.
right? Yeah.
But we're going to learn that she's lived all around the world.
That's true.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that in a minute.
I looked for a shirt that was all around the world. The best I could do was come up with Route 66.
Route 66, yeah.
I live right off of 66, too.
So Jim has a little bio, Katie, that he's going to share, and then we're going to start talking about Humble Yet Fierce.
Yeah.
Great.
Katie McQuaid is the former deputy director of logistics in the CIA, spending more than 3 decades in the CIA, including 12 years living abroad. She was the first female promoted to senior executive as a supply officer in the CIA's Logistics Career Service. She was the first senior executive support officer in Afghanistan. Katie is an award-winning author, leadership consultant, and founder of the McQuaid Corporate Performance, LLC. She is a graduate of Penn State University. Katie shares stories of courage and adventure and faith related to the journey in her newest book, Humble Yet Fierce, My Life, Behind the Curtain of the CIA. Welcome, Katie.
Welcome. She looks just like her book cover.
She does.
Yeah.
Tell when we're here, I don't have a spot for it, but tell us about that cover.
Yeah.
How did it get started there?
Well, it's an interesting story, actually. I had wanted something. I did not want to be on the cover of the book. Absolutely not. But I got feedback from my author community. I was working with the community as I was writing the book, and I gave some sample book covers out to the community, and they all came back and said, "Where's your picture on the cover?" And so I did put my picture on the cover, but I couldn't be by myself. So this is Grace, my dog. I've written a series of children's books about Grace, and she's actually an integral part of my story and finding my voice in writing this book.
Yes.
That's great.
Well, we are so delighted that you're here, and we have so much to talk about. So in the bio, Jim mentioned that you spent some time at Penn State. Do you want to just briefly kind of tell us about your experience there and how it prepared you for what came next?
Sure. And I do talk about this in my memoir, but I I went to Penn State on a full athletic scholarship as a swimmer, and I was recruited by Penn State, and I absolutely fell in love with it. And I went to Penn State. But little did I know, when I first got to Penn State, a few months later, my father would die unexpectedly right before Christmas of my freshman year. And then also the Olympic trials were canceled because
Mm-hmm.
boys
Mm-hmm.
Olympics in 1980. And so I had two pretty significant difficult events that occurred to me right at the beginning of my freshman year at Penn State. And so I never really fully achieved the level I wanted to as a swimmer at Penn State. I think I probably could have benefited from some therapy back in the day. But anyway, I loved my experience at Penn State. I swam my heart out, and I was a decent student. And so I graduated in 4 years, but it was a rough start at Penn State.
But what was your specialty in swimming?
200 breaststroke and 400 IM.
Oh,
Okay.
tough ones.
The Olympics, and I had so much fun watching those athletes and being in such great shape.
Yeah, I was going to ask if if you were glued to the Olympics.
You know, I know that we talked earlier the day about a little about swimming, and Bobbi did a little swimming as a young person.
Very little.
You know, if I got in the pool, I sink to the bottom pretty quick. So you're gonna have to save me.
Oh my gosh. So when you graduated, of course, like all of us, when we graduate, we go looking for what am I going to do next? And somehow you got connected to the CIA. How did that happen?
Well, I graduated from Penn State in 1983, and you might recall the job market was absolutely horrible at the time. Mm-hmm. And my mother kept calling me at Penn State and saying, hey, a good family friend, the CIA is hiring logistics officers, and Walt really wants your resume. And I will tell you, I had no burning passion to work at the CIA, none whatsoever. But my mom was persistent, and I eventually sent my resume to Walt, who was the deputy director of logistics at the time. And they offered me a job when I was 22 years old. And if I'm really honest with you, I will tell you, I had no other job offer at the time. It was the best job offer.
Sometimes they are.
Yeah, sometimes they are.
But I will tell you that 18 months after I started, I went on my first overseas assignment. And while I was there, I saw these young kids climbing over heaps of burning trash. And I saw poverty like I'd never seen in my life. And I thought, if my job could make their world a better place, then I was in. And that's...
Yes, you were called.
Yes,
you were called.
That was your first assignment, with the CIA, right? It was overseas.
Yes.
You didn't get any soft company jobs there in Miami Beach or anything like that.
No.
And had you requested? How did that work? Did you say, "Okay, I'm ready," and Afghanistan looks good, or did they just say, "Katie, you're going to Afghanistan"? How does that work?
So early on in my career, it was you go where they assign you. I applied to go to 7 positions in Europe for my first assignment, and they were all in Europe, beautiful countries. And when I got called in and they told me about my first assignment, I was going halfway around the world to the Far East. I didn't know a soul. And if you remember, there was no internet. It cost $10 a minute to call home. And it was a really big step of faith for me to get on that plane and go to my first assignment in the Far East.
Yeah.
How did you do? You spoke English, obviously, but did you have to learn another language when you got there?
So I spoke high school and college Spanish, or I took Spanish. And my first assignment, Spanish wasn't the language, but it was heavily influenced by Spanish. So I had a pretty good ear for the local language. But no, as a support officer in the CIA, you typically didn't get language training, maybe street survival language training, but rarely did we get to the proficiency of full.
It seems like as you travel around, you enjoy exploring the culture and the food.
Yes.
of wherever you happen to land. Yes?
Yes. True. One of the things a logistics officer sometimes does is when we have visitors come from DC, like VIPs, I mean, anything from senators to presidents to you name it, right? But if I had to pick the restaurant, I would find the hole in the wall, the one that had the best food, maybe not the fanciest atmosphere, but I have a knack for finding really good food in far-reaching places.
Yeah.
That's good. You talk about dignitaries or people you have to show around. Would you take them to these hole-in-the-wall restaurants? Would they be happy, or were they expecting to go into some great establishment?
Well, the super high level people, I wouldn't take to a hole in the wall, but people that were pretty senior,
Yeah, okay.
I would, because I wanted them to really feel the culture in this city or country I was living in. Food is such an important part of any culture. And like when you see people working behind the kitchen and you smell, there's nothing like a good hole in the wall restaurant.
Yeah.
That's true.
No,
It's
it's
true.
true.
Here too. You look for the places that have all the cars in front, and that's what you go by.
Absolutely.
Do you have a quick story on this subject that you'd like to share?
About food overseas?
Sure.
Actually, one of my favorite stories to tell is I was stationed in Afghanistan, and the chief of station, that's that person who runs operations for CIA in a foreign country. While I was in Afghanistan, the chief of station was leaving, and so his goodbye dinner was with President Karzai in Afghanistan, and I was invited to the dinner. And long story short, I ended up sitting next to President Karzai because he insisted I sit next to him. And throughout the meal, and I do talk about it in the book, but throughout the meal, he doted on me, and he kept saying, well, the red rice goes with the chicken, green rice goes with the beef. And he just doted on me because he really wanted me to understand the Afghan food I was eating. And it was just a beautiful, beautiful meal.
Wow.
Yeah, that would be fun.
We haven't had anything like that in our career.
Not yet.
No, not yet. We're open.
I got there and I tried to sit as far away from him as possible because I'm shy and all right. And sit next to me. I said, no, that's for the chief. And he said, no, you sit next to me. And so,
oh my goodness, how fun. We're going to take a very, very, very short break. And when we come back, our featured author, our guest, Katie McQuaid, is going to take us more behind the curtain of the CIA. I think she's actually going to read something for us. But before we do that, here is a word about one of the places you can find her books, as well as all the books of our Rendezvous with the Writer featured authors, the Out West Shop Bookshop affiliate page at bookshop.org. Take a listen. And Katie, we're going to be right back.
Story is everything. Find a great one on Out West Shop's bookshop. Go to outwestshop.com. Find books and CDs on the menu. Choose Shop Out West on bookshop.org. Browse through featured authors on Rendezvous with a Writer. Explore curated book lists and our featured picks. Add in note cards, calendars, and jigsaw puzzles. One-stop shopping for great gifts. Use the search box to find thousands more titles. Make the switch. Your purchase supports us as independent booksellers. That's our story.
Welcome back. Welcome back to Rendezvous with a Writer with Jim and Bobbi Bell and special guest Katie McQuaid. We're talking about her book, Humble Yet Fierce, Story in
Behind
Time
the curtain.
in the CIA.
The CIA behind the curtain. It's like the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain. Katie, did you have a little something you'd like to read for us?
Yes, it's from the author's note in my book. This book captures a look at the life in the CIA from someone who worked behind the scenes in logistics and global support operations. From driving on dangerous roads in remote villages to closing a CIA covert facility, to my experiences in war zones. The stories will engage you and anxiously have you turning the pages, wanting to see what comes next. I also share personal stories highlighting 1979, the year that defined me professionally and set the foundation for my life. Humble Yet Fierce is for you if you're at a point where you want to try something new, are at a crossroads, or need to make a decision you've been putting off. Perhaps you're entering the workforce for the first time, recently divorced, or in a mid-level position and need encouragement to take your next steps. Hopefully this book will help you find your voice and the courage to move forward with grace.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Very good.
Mm-hmm. And its book does all of that, and you will be on the edge of your seat when we're in the typhoon, when we're with Senator Kerry, when we're all different kinds of places that she takes us with drama going on, and you're so calm. You're so calm.
Before we get into this segment here on our values and things Katie's going to talk about, I just want to back up a second and talk about logistics, which I kind of call procurement. I think it's somewhere in that ballpark, but the CIA you kind of handle a little differently. And I want to hear about the helicopter.
So CIA logistics is a little bit different than traditional logistics. I mean, it is everything from procurement to shipping things secretly around the world to disposition. It's a tooth to tail supply chain. But in logistics, we often have to find solutions to problems that can't be found in a textbook or we didn't in school. That is true. And I was in one country and we needed a helicopter and for a mission. And I went to the foreign national that was helping run our warehouse. And I told her what we needed. We needed a helicopter. And she said, Katie, what color helicopter? Red, green?
So you never really knew when you went into work, probably. I mean, maybe there were some projects you were still working on, but you probably never really knew exactly what was going to land on your desk or email, or, well, this is before email and such.
I often said, no 2 days were alike as a logistics officer. I never knew from one day to the next what was going to be coming across my desk.
So if you were I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, that'd be a tougher question. Somebody comes up in front of you and says, "Well, you thinking I need a dozen donuts?" And say, "No, I need a helicopter in about an hour."
And a dozen donuts. So if you happen to be in a room, you're meeting new people, you were very involved in community and such outside of work, and somebody were to say, as we typically do when we're meeting somebody new, "Oh, what's your name?" "Oh, Katie Oh, what do you do?" Yeah. What would your answer be?
So I lived undercover for 32 years. I wasn't allowed to tell people where I worked for security reasons. So if you came to me at a party and said, "Katie, what do you do?" I would say, "Oh, I'm in logistics. I just ship boxes around the world," or "I ship boxes." And immediately I had a gift for getting people to glaze over. And within 30 seconds, they would change this.
That's brilliant.
They probably just walk away too.
Yeah, so we want to get a little bit more in depth in the book. So tell us what inspired you to put your life story in an interesting way in this book.
Thank you. I really didn't want to write the book. For years, I had a good friend saying, "You've got to tell your story." So I actually started by speaking. I was doing some public speaking, teaching about the art of humble leadership. I'm an avid student of leadership. And every time I spoke to an organization or a group, I would be asked, "Where's your book? Where's your book? We want more stories." And typically after a talk, I would have a long line of people wanting to meet me. And usually there were younger women that would come up, and many had tears in their eyes actually, and said, "You're so inspiring, but I really want more." And I realized that it was time for me to share my stories so that I could encourage women to step out into jobs where they don't fit the mold. And it was really through those speaking engagements that I realized I have to do this to help other people, give them some tools to help be successful when they don't fit the mold.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, I was wondering, as you said that speaking and people would come up to you, would some of those people be just like new college graduates, or would there be some ladies maybe looking for a change in life, or some that life had not been so kind to them?
All of the above.
Yeah.
All of the above.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So there are some key, I'm going to call them principles, but you will
Yeah.
have a better name for them, that you cover in the book that I would say are kind of your guiding light that you have followed, that you shine for us to follow.
Yeah.
And the first one is say yes. Will you very briefly, because we're going to come back and talk about each one a little bit more in depth, could you just tell us what those steps are that you have built your life around?
Yeah, one of my themes in the book is about just saying yes. When I reflected on my life and my career, opportunities came when I said yes. Right? And so I encourage readers to just say yes. And I have stories about people who have read the book and they've said yes, and the results have been amazing. It's just a perspective.
Yeah.
Another one of my themes is teamwork and how important teamwork is. Like, we're much better together as a team than we are as alone. And especially, well, at the CIA, the best missions, the best operations all included teamwork. Like, you just can't do it alone. So that's another kind of overriding theme that I talk about in the book. Another one is live your life as a leader. Like, leadership isn't just a position. It's about living life, like how we show up in every day. We can be a leader. We don't have to be in a leadership position to be a leader.
And then, of course, finding your voice.
Yeah, finding your voice. And isn't it funny? That's the last thing I talk about. But finding what, it took me, I say it took me 50 years to find my voice. And as I reflected in writing the book, I realized there were times in my life I figured out how to find my voice, either by writing a letter to my parents, because it was something I didn't have the courage to talk to them about, but I wrote it. And then I started with writing the Everybody Loves Grace series. That helped me find my voice, and then public speaking, and now Humble Yet Fierce.
Would you say finding your voice is like speaking up for yourself, or is that too simplified?
No, it is. It's speaking up for yourself and for others.
That could be a problem for a guy besides just a lady, So, and today I'm thinking about this afternoon, okay? And I'm thinking about what you're saying about speaking up, and I'm thinking, sometimes when you speak out there in public, you get a lot of people like to steamroll right over you.
Yes.
So you gotta be brave and just want to say, "Well, I don't want to do that." What do you mean you don't want to do that?
Well, another skill that you share in the book that I thought was so interesting is you kind of began to be known as someone who knew how to read the room. And would you tell us, we may all kind of know what that means, but could you just enlighten us a little bit about the skill of reading a room?
Yeah, I think reading a room is so important. It helps to have more engaging conversations, understand where a meeting might be going, or where people are. But reading a room to me is reading people's body language, who might be sitting next to who's sitting at the head of the table, who's sitting at the side of the table. Like, the dynamics, there's a lot of dynamics that are going on in a room. I also can read a person's body language, and I can tell if they're having a bad day. If somebody's biting their nails, or if they're falling asleep. And there's these little indicators that we get by paying attention to the small details. And even, like, I would go into big meetings and I'd see, oh, so-and-so is talking to so-and-so out in the hallway before they went in. They're conspiring to do something, right? Like, understanding who's aligned with who. And that's, there's a lot of facets to it, but a lot of it's just paying attention to the small body language. And
Would you get training on this in the CIA, or is this something you just kind of discovered on your own?
I think it's a gift I had as a child. I actually had a boss one time that told me that I could read a room better than almost anybody he knew, because I think it was a gift I just had from growing up.
Mm-hmm.
You know, part of the philosophy here in the book is that you're a lady among a bunch of guys.
Mhm.
And particularly in the beginning, a long time ago, you were one of the very, very few ladies.
Yes.
How, how did that play out when you first started? Was it really a problem?
Yes, it was. I wouldn't say it was a problem, but it required attention, right?
Mm,
Um, when I was interviewed to work at the CIA, the hiring officer said to me, "You're going to get pregnant and have babies, so we're hiring more women than men." Like, I don't think that would be said to a man, right? Like, you're going to have children and you're going to quit, right? So that was my first indication that. And then I also, when I was started the CIA, I watched women leaders that were pretty much battle axes because they had to be really tough to lead in the CIA as a woman, right? And they became one of the
right.
guys in order to lead. And I knew that wasn't me. And I used to say, if that's what it's going to take, I'm not going to be a leader here because I just didn't want to be a battle axe, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And
but the challenges came kind of more in my career when, like, I would have an idea and it would get shut down, but a male colleague could say the same idea and it would get accepted. And it was figuring out, how do I be effective how can I be effective and have my ideas accepted without like screaming and being a bitch, right?
And obviously, you learned your way around it, over it, through it. You learned ways
yeah.
that worked.
I would assume that if you had an idea and you were trying to present it and it wasn't going well, maybe you come back and present it again and maybe again, or maybe you meet somebody in a corridor and say, look, I got to talk to you about this.
That's what I learned. I actually learned men are much better networkers and kind of have their they spend the time to get the idea socialized with people before they walk in the room. And that was something I really had to learn to do, was get in alignment, get in allegiance, because I worked well with most of the men I worked with, and finding those that would support the idea, and so that when they came in the room where the decision was made, they were supportive.
And this book is just full of all of those types of insight and tips. So you might be reading a really edge of the chair story about a situation, but Katie is also sharing how she worked her way through that, or how all of these tips about leadership, about working as a team, saying yes, all of these principles are woven into the stories so that you can feel very engaged in the story, but also get some counseling as you go along, some career and life counseling. Before we go to our very next very short break, would you let's talk about that first principle, say yes, and also faith kind of goes along with it. Would you like to give us an example of a time you said yes?
Sure. One day I was sitting at my desk in headquarters, and back in those days, we had a green phone on our desk, which is the secure phone. And there was no caller ID, but my green phone rang and I picked it up. And on the other end was my boss, Bob, a chief of supply group. And he said, Katie, I need somebody with your overseas experience to go on a special project, and I need you to be gone. The Gulf War was starting, they knew, in 4 days. And so you need to be on a plane in 4 days. We don't know how long you're going to be gone for. And I said, I'll go. I just said yes. And the result of that story, and I can fill you in more on it, but we ended up releasing hostages that were being held at gunpoint. We, I got on that plane in 4 days, and I didn't know how long I was going to be gone. And it was an amazing experience.
Yeah. And so when you do that and not knowing when you're going to be back, you have to have set up like bill pay and, all this, which probably at that time, I don't know, some of that might have been around. But if we were just told you got 4 days to get out and you're going to move to Paris, we'd be like, oh my, are our passports good? I mean, we would not, that would not be an assignment for the bells.
Katie, were you married at the time that you got this request for assignment? Or
No,
were you single?
I was single at the time.
Okay.
Yeah. But I did get another assignment asked to go very short notice when I was married. So it's something I did as a single woman and as a married woman.
Yeah.
In that time that you described, did you take your husband with you, or did he have to stay where he was?
He had to stay where he was.
Okay.
Yeah. So interesting.
That makes it tough, you know?
Yeah. Okay, we have one last little quick announcement that we want to do, Katie, and this is to really acknowledge and thank sponsor Blue Cottage Agency, who have come alongside of us and have been a marvelous team to work with, talk about teamwork and leadership. And so here's a word from Blue Cottage Agency, and we'll be right back.
Rendezvous with a Writer is sponsored by Blue Cottage Agency and Clicks by Madison, your author publicity and book marketing team. Experienced, trusted, effective. Contact them today at bluecottageagency.com.
Welcome back to Rendezvous with a Writer. Special guest tonight, Katie McQuaid. We're talking about her book here.
Humble.
But fierce.
Yet fierce. A lion doesn't need to roar, right? Okay, we're going to continue with a little bit more in depth because you just share so much wonderful material here in this book. So let's now talk about, we said a little bit about yes and working with faith. Let's talk now about the principle of value of teamwork, what that means to you, and then give us an example.
Okay. Like I mentioned, we work better as a team. I've been on teams my whole life, from swim teams to elder teams at a church. Like everything I've done in my life has been on teams. And I've always known in the CIA, everything is a team. And I mentioned about the hostages that we released, but I got on that plane and I ended up overseas. And the boss called me in and said, Katie, we've got hostages being held at gunpoint in the parking lot. We need to figure out how to get this secure communications gear, like this special gear to the hostages so that we can get them out safely. This was my second, I had only done one tour overseas, so I was still pretty new. How do I know how to get this gear into hostages, right? So we were in this old, dark, dilapidated building, and I went down the hall and I knocked on doors and I asked people can you guys come? And we went into this conference room it had a big whiteboard and it was just card chairs and that kind of thing. And we brainstormed, how are we going to get this gear to the hostages? And we decided to make it look like a first aid kit, right? And we put the gear in the box, and I was the one that had to go to the souk and get all the material. And that was like a life harrowing experience itself. But essentially we put all the gear in a box. I painted it to look like a first aid kit. The boss said, okay, we got approval from headquarters that the operation was a go. And he came in and said, who's willing to go on the helicopter? I said, I'll go. And lo and behold, we got the gear to the hostages and they were released the next day.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Amazing story.
How long did it take you to put the gear together? How long a project was that?
Like a day, like time was of the essence. It was.
Okay.
And the point of that is really teamwork. Like I couldn't have come up with that solution by myself. And I also needed to bounce ideas off people with more experience than I had. And just like it took a team to come up with the solution. And it was a good one.
Okay. How many people were in the team that you kind of worked with there on this project?
I would say about eight of us.
About 8. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And when you mentioned about sort of dilapidated quarters, I know at one moment you described being working in a shipping container. My sense is the CIA in this kind of job world that you lived in didn't really want to announce where you were. There weren't big doors that said, CIA logistics, enter here. I mean, it was it was very
in the basements of buildings, or like outposts, or especially if it was something, if it wasn't a full-fledged, like if it was a 3-year assignment, typically the offices were okay and we were in kind of normal offices. But if it was a special operation or to support expeditionary, then we were in interesting places.
They probably said Joe's Fish Market, right?
Yeah. You went through the dry cleaner to get around to the back, like in Man from Uncle. Okay, how about let's talk about leadership as a way of life.
Yeah, actually, the last question was a perfect segue. So, I talk about leadership is not a position; it's a way of living, being, and interacting with people in everyday life. And I flew to Afghanistan. It was 19 hours on a jet. I was the chief of support, which meant I was responsible. My team was responsible for all the support operations across Afghanistan. Big, big job. Lots and lots of people. And I landed at the airport. I had a security detail. I was in an armored car, and they drive me to my office, and I step in my office. I'm like, this is a bathroom. This was white tile. There was a drain in the floor, and it had that like echo of the toilet had been removed and the bathtub had been removed. But there I was, my office. Here I'm this lofty position as chief of support, and I was working out of a bathroom 14 hours a day, 7 days a week.
That keeps you humble.
It keeps you humble. And actually, it's like, I'm here to do a job. It doesn't matter what the traffic are. And I actually brought this along. I don't know. So as my going away present, this used to be on the door.
And for those of us that are listening to this interview, she just held up a big sign that says, "Bathroom is occupied. Do not enter." Really big sign. You couldn't miss it.
Well, Katie, in this assignment, then if that was your office during the day, where'd you sleep at night?
That's when I slept in a sea container. We had sea containers that were converted, but I felt very fortunate because I didn't have to share I had half of a sea container, and I didn't have to share because I was there for a year. Yeah. People that were there for 30 or 90 days, they had to share. So, and I had my own bathroom.
Wow. It's amazing.
We talk about leadership here. Did the CIA give you leadership training?
Yes, they did.
Okay.
Yeah, they not early on in my career. When my first assignment, I was 23 years old when I landed halfway across the world, and I had a warehouse of 19 foreign nationals that I had to supervise. I didn't know what the heck I was doing, right?
Yep.
But I learned by initiation by fire. And but as the CIA has made a concerted effort over the years to grow its leadership development, and there's a serious effort towards that.
Was there some special training as you went into hot spots or areas where maybe combat, did you know how to fire a weapon, and were you prepared for those kinds of situations?
Yes, actually, I had a couple assignments where I had to be certified to carry a weapon, which meant I'd have to go to firearms training and then also pass the certification test. And then CIA has a course they call Crash and Bang, and it's how you drive defensively in a hostile environment. And so I had a couple of versions of that as well.
Wow.
So that's
how was that?
And did you have to do it on the wrong side of the road? I mean,
No, I did. The countries where they drove on the right, what I would call the right side of the road, but it was a lot of fun. That class was fun. And
see, she just thrived. You just thrived on all of this. We would be, we would just have upset tummies, and we just be, and this was just exactly what you were called to do, because you feel it as you read the book that you say yes, but you also thrive, absolutely thrive in these situations. You tell a story about a typhoon. But you just take up that story. You just give us a highlight of the typhoon story.
So that story, I loved writing that story because I actually put myself in this situation. But I was in my first assignment. I was there probably a week. I don't know. I wasn't there very long, and we had this category 4 or 5 typhoon that came through and I didn't know that I didn't have to go to work that day, but I had to go to work. So I walked out of my apartment. The water was up to my hips, and I was literally walking across the compound because I didn't have a car. I also didn't have a voice, so I didn't call and ask for help or for somebody to come pick me up. So I'm walking across the compound, and palm fronds are flying by, chairs, like sun chairs and trash cans, you name it, were flying. And I was just like, woof, woof, woof. And then I got to work, and I was drenched, and I closed the door, and I took off my clothes and put them in front of a fan so they would dry out. But we got to work for sewing sandbags by hand. The locals were sewing them so that our gear would not get ruined.
Yeah, and you couldn't really walk out of that room until your clothes were dry.
I thought later, a couple weeks ago, we were reminiscing about the typhoon, and somebody said, "Oh, Katie, we thought you were homesick." I was like, "No, I was bum naked in my office."
Let's talk now for a moment about another one of the very important principles, and that is finding your voice.
You know, I didn't realize until I wrote this book about how I really didn't have a voice when I was younger. And I would watch kids get bullied in school, and I never really stood up for them. Like I could befriend the kid that was bullied, but I couldn't stand up to the bully. And I realized I really didn't have a voice when I was younger and growing up. And even at CIA, I had difficulty speaking up in large groups, or if my opinion was different. But finding my voice, there was an experience when I was younger. I wrote my parents a letter because I was abused, as one of my swim coaches abused me at the military district of Washington. And she used to hit us with a seatbelt. And so I wanted to ask my parents to switch teams, but I couldn't find my voice to talk to them. So I wrote them a letter and asked if I could switch teams, and they said yes. So, what I love to encourage readers is that find our voice whatever way we can, whether it's writing a letter, whether it's talking to the kid that is bullied, or finding a friend and figuring out how to communicate a tough issue. And then, just this whole experience of writing Humble Yet Fierce, I had to find my voice I found them through the Grace books. I wrote a series of children's books, true stories about my dog Grace, and they're just stories of love and kindness. But my willingness to find my voice and be seen through her books then gave me the courage to find my voice and tell the true stories that are in here.
Sometimes some of us are lucky to find a mentor that will help us work through these kind of things. Did you have anybody that kind of came along beside you, or did you just have to do this all on your own?
Oh, I had good mentors along the way. Yeah. I didn't understand the value of a mentor early in my career, but about mid-level, I realized I can't do this alone, and I really need somebody to help coach and guide me. So I had a few really amazing mentors at the CIA, and now outside in life, I have mentors, people that I look up to, and I ask advice. And
No, that's true. Not everybody can find a mentor, so that makes their life a lot tougher. And that's good. That's good.
Tell us a little bit about Grace, your dog, Grace.
Grace was a Finnish Lapland. She came to me when she was 4 years old. She lived on a farm up in Canada, and she was abused. And the owner, I went on a hunt for a Finnish Lapland, and the owner said, "You know what, I think I need to find a safe place for Grace because my husband doesn't treat her well when he comes on his business trips." So Grace went from a farm to downtown Denver. I lived in Denver for 12 years, and that's my Western connection. And she came, and I wrote the books because I wanted to encourage children to know that change can happen and good things can happen. And when Grace came to Denver, everywhere I went, people would say, "There's Grace, there's Grace." I could go take her into Walgreens, and next thing I know, 4 people are sitting on the floor petting Grace in Walgreens. Or we would go back to where the prescription line is, people standing in line, and she would pick somebody in line, and I knew that was the sickest person in line. Like she would sit in front of them, and they would lean over and pet her. So she just had this incredible gift of connecting, making people feel special. Oh, she just looked at people in their eyes and down into their heart. And
yeah. So, go ahead. No, go ahead.
What kind of dog was she?
Yes.
I was trying to guess, but I wasn't sure.
She's a Finnish Lapphund, and they're herders of reindeer in Finland. That's their bred.
Herders of reindeer. Okay.
Very interesting.
So, Katie, what are you working on next, and how can people find you?
So I am working on book 7 of the Everybody Loves Grace series, and I actually she has a fan base around the world, and she died about 1.5 years ago, and I've had her readers asking me, parents asking me to please write about the transition. And so it's a tough book to write, but I'm about done with it. And so I'm working on that. And I think it's Grace's final gift to the world is to prepare children to understand what death is and how we grieve, and then also how we can get on the other side of it.
Very good.
And yes, where can people find you? Because you also can come out and talk and teach, and so how can they find you?
I have a website, www.katiemcquade.com, and that's my speaking website, and the Humble Yet Fierce book is there as well. And I also have everybodylovesgrace.com for the Grace books, but katiemcquade.com is the best way to reach me. I answer the emails. So.
Jim, I think you have a couple quotes.
We have a quote or two.
A couple quotes to share. I always love to hear what he finds.
Well, we try to tie around the story, and we kind of found a couple people from the outside, and then we always like to do something that you say in the book. We're going to start with this first guy, Ian Fleming, the James Bond guy. And he says, history is moving pretty quickly these days, and the heroes and villains keep changing parts. And next we have John Clancy, who says, fix your eyes forward on what you can do, not back on what you cannot change.
Wow.
And from Katie, we have leadership is not just a title. Leadership is a way of living, being, and interacting with others in everyday life. Leaders can't do it alone. It takes teamwork.
Yeah.
We thank you for that, Katie.
Yeah. Really fun to spend time with you, Katie. We thank you so much for being with us tonight. And we thank our listeners and watchers for sharing this time, perhaps live with us or down the road, or maybe you're listening even a year from now. We thank you so much. We want to thank Sam Hassan of LA Talk Radio, Blue Cottage Agency, Alex Dormont, and the Hot Texas Swing Band. All of these folks help us do what we love to do here, and that is share our author's story, which we will be doing again next week when our guests we'll have two authors, Peggy Chambers, and she's bringing along with her friend, Paula Binge, and we'll be here too. But Peggy's kind of going to take the lead role. It's really fun. She is very excited about Paula's new book, which just arrived in the mail today. It releases shortly, but we actually got a copy to share on camera called At the Heart of the Game. So join us next week for Peggy Chambers and Paula Binge. And of course, we will be here as well.
We will.
And do you have anything else to share?
We thank you, Katie. We appreciate the interview tonight. And we say, as always, it's always a great day out west.
Keep writing and we'll keep reading. We'll see you down the trail, Katie. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. This was fun.